The next chapter, which is chapter number 8, is Ahkam al-Mad. Ahkam al-Mad now is building on from the previous chapter. Now we know there are two types of Mad. Okay, the second type of Mad has different rulings. What are these rulings? So he mentions Mad has three rulings. It can either be laazim, waajib, or jaa'iz. How many? Three rulings. Okay, what does it mean? Laazim means that you have to stretch it, and you have to stretch it for 6. Waajib means you have to stretch it, but you can do 4 or 6. And jaa'iz means you have the option. You can keep it as a normal stretch of 2, or you can go to 4 or 6. And these numbers that I'm mentioning are approximations. So now he gives us different mads. And for each one, he tells us the rule. So the first, you're not writing anything, so you memorize, you're just chilling there. Because we mentioned quite a lot so far, and I thought, mashallah, maybe you've covered it already, but remember, I tried to give you stuff in a very easy, bullet point way, so it's easy for you to digest and to teach other people. But you have to write until it gets stuck in your head, yeah? Because if you don't write, you might remember it now, but after a month, after even an hour sometimes, you're going to forget. So it is chapter number 8, and in this chapter the author mentions to us that Mad has 3 rules. للمد أحكام 3 تدوم وهي الوجوب والجواز واللزوم. So he's talking about Mad Far'i now. So it has 3. Okay. So the first name or type of Mad he's going to talk about now is called Mad Muttasil. Mad Muttasil is if after a letter of Mad comes a Hamza in the same word. The ruling of it, so I would write Mad Muttasil, the ruling is waajib. And then describe what Mad Muttasil is, which is what he explained in the poem, is if after the letter of Mad comes a Hamza in the same word.
Like ma'a.
Good, like the word for water, al-ma'u. There's a Hamza after an Alif Mad, and it's part of the same word. So in that case, the ruling of that stretch would be waajib. You have to do 4 or 6. Okay. Second type of Mad is Mad Munfasil. Munfasil. Mad Munfasil. And the ruling for this is jaa'iz. Jaa'iz. What did we say jaa'iz meant?
You can stretch it for 2, 4 or 6 harakat.
Good. And it's if after a letter of Mad comes a Hamza in a separate word. So for example, Inna ends with Alif Mad, right? And the next word, أعطيناك الكوثر, or the next part of the rest of the ayah. أعطيناك starts with the Hamza, right? So now after the Alif Mad in the first word, came a Hamza in the second word. Is the Hamza in the same word as the Alif Mad?
No.
No, because Inna is a word and A'ta is a separate word. So after the letter of Mad came a Hamza, but in a separate word. So now this Mad is called Mad al-Munfasil, and the ruling for it is jaa'iz. Okay, the next type of Mad that the author mentions is Mad عارض للسكون. عارض للسكون. عارض with a ضاد للسكون. And that is, the ruling for it is that is jaiz. And it is if a sukoon is made to appear, or you can say it this way, a temporary sukoon is made to appear after a letter of mad. And now I'll give you an example. Or you could write another way, if a letter of mad is followed by a temporary sukoon. What does it mean, a temporary sukoon? A temporary sukoon means that you've made it appear, it's not originally there, but you've made it appear by stopping. So for example, we know that when we stop our recitation at the end of an ayah, or when we stop, we put sukoon on the last letter. That's one of the ways of stopping, the most common way. So for example, if you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, the noon on the word Al-Alameen has a fatha. But because we stop, we put sukoon on it. So we've made a temporary sukoon appear. It's not originally there. If we were to join the ayah together, you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. So there's no sukoon. We've only made a temporary sukoon appear to stop. And that sukoon on the noon that we've made appear came after a ya mad, al-alameen, right? So in this case, this is called aarid lis-sukoon. This type of mad is called aarid lis-sukoon. And the rule for it is that you can stretch it, a normal stretch of 2 harakat, or you can do an extra stretch of 4 or 6. These rules generally apply to the letters of leen as well. The next one that he mentions is called mad badal. Mad badal.
Changing.
And this is a bit tricky, okay? If after a hamza comes a mad, a letter of mad. The reason this is called changing is because grammatically the word was different before, but it changed, okay? So for example, the word iman, hamza, and then there's a yamad iman. Okay. Yeah. Li fi Quraysh. Yeah. So what's the ruling for it? It's jaa'iz, but not in our recitation. In Hafs and Asim, we don't do it. So that's why you hear sometimes reciters when they read Warsh, they say li fi Quraysh, because this is mad badal. They can stretch it 2, 4, or 6. But in our qira'ah that we're used to, we only do 2. So for us, this is an exception. We only do 2. Like he says, كَآمَنُوا وَإِيمَانًا خُذَا in the poem, yeah? So that was badal. I think the next one, which is the final one that he mentions, is mad lazim. Mad lazim. And the ruling of it is that it's lazim, same as the name. It's called mad lazim, and the ruling of it is that it's lazim. And what is it? Is if after a letter of mad comes a permanent sukoon. If after a letter of mad comes a permanent sukoon. What does that mean? We said temporary sukoon before, we stop and we made the sukoon appear, right? Here is if the sukoon is there, whether you stop or carrying on, the sukoon is there. In the Quran, this can come in a letter that has a shadda, or it can come without the shadda. Without the shadda, it comes only twice in the Quran. In the word al-ana. So there's a, it's mad, and it's followed by lam sakina, al-ana. Okay, so that has to be stretched for 6 harakat. But most of the time you're going to see it when there's a mad, when there's a shadda. Because shadda is an indication of 2 letters, right? As we covered previously. And the first of those 2 letters is sakin. So the ruling is that it has to have 6 harakat, and the definition of it is that there is a permanent sukoon after letter of mad. طيب? Good. So that's the end of that chapter. Any questions on it? Those are not all the types of mad, but the main. There's only a couple of others. طيب. Next chapter.